Good morning and welcome to the new episode of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. A couple of days back, some political scientists were talking to me and they raised a very pertinent question. They said, how is it that India is a parliamentary democracy? And yet, the Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces is the President. Yes, it is. As a matter of fact, why did the founding fathers not wear the supreme command in the Council of Ministers headed by the Prime Minister? Given that they had made a very conscious choice that India should be parliamentary democracy and not an executive presidency like France or America, US. Article 53 of the Constitution is very clear. I say that the executive power of the Union shall be vested in the President of India. And Article 53(2) has a rather very interesting formation. And this formulation is interesting. And you see, they have used very legalized language without prejudice to the generality of the foregoing provision. The supreme command of the defense force of the Union shall be vested in the President, and the exercise there shall be regulated by law. Now, law is something which can be changed by any government. The Prime Minister can pass a law, the President can return it, and it passes again. The President has to approve of it. And by law, if they say that the Supreme Commander shall be the Prime Minister, it shall be the Prime Minister. But there are dangers within that because the President is supposed to be above party politics, while the Prime Minister is not. And the power of the President in India are very circumscribed by Article 74. We state that the President shall exercise his function only on the aid and advice of the Council of the Ministers headed by the Prime Minister. So even if he is shown as the Supreme Commander of Armed Forces, really he is not. He is just there because of the sufferance of the Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister gives that sort of a regard to the President as a first citizen, that okay, you are the Supreme Commander and you have my permission to remain so. It's just like saying that I'm the boss in my house and I have my wife's permission to say so. So it is more ceremonial, but the real decision is taken by the Prime Minister. You remember, all the wars are declared by the President. He signed them, but the decision is by the Cabinet. Even Operation Blue Star, or sending army to Northeast or to Kashmir, this was a political decision. And the President just headed it. But then interestingly, one gentleman raised a question, very interesting. He's a professor at Duke University, and he said that if you pursue the debates of the Constituent Assembly on the draft Article 42 that corresponds to the Article 53 of the Constitution, then it raises another question. There is absolutely no discussion on vesting the supreme command of the defense forces with the President. It almost seems, and I agree with that the Constitution framers had taken it as given that the supreme command would be vested in the presidency. And it's incredible that this Constitution, which is the largest Constitution, which was debated, each article was debated, this thing was not debated. Even though the President is only a titular head, his title, that's it. But this was not even debated in the Constitution. There should have been some discussion. As a matter of fact, any and every constitutional scheme has enough planes, and there's a play in the joints it can be interpreted differently. And that's why the Supreme Court interprets it according to the custom in the interest of the country. But if the Supreme Court is erratic, It can interpret differently. So when the constitutional crisis comes to head, or an external emergency manifests, the term defense forces is there. But then, if you look at the Constitution, the word defense forces of the Union is not defined anywhere, as it is done in the US Constitution, as it is done in the Third and the Fourth Republic of France. Not here. And a clue as to why the Supreme Command of the armed forces came to be vested, and this was my response to that element, is in the presidents can possibly be found in the articulation by a very capable member of the Constitutional Assembly, K.M. Munshi. While speaking on the amendment moved by Professor K.T. Shah on the draft Article 42, Munshi had observed, and this is very pertinent, that the strongest government and the most elastic executive has been found to be in England. And that is because the executive power rests in the cabinet supported by the majority of the lower house, which has financial powers under the Constitution. And as a result thereof, is the rule of the majority in the legislature that supports its leader in the cabinet, which advises the head of the state, namely the king, and here in India the president. The king or the president is thus placed above the party. As I said earlier, they are titular heads, that's it. And they have got to act on the advice of the Prime Minister. And then he makes a very important statement. He is made really the symbol of the impartial dignity of the Constitution. So it is only to prevent politicalization of the defense services that he is made the head. He has no party. As a matter of fact, there is one lacuna here. The moment the president becomes the president and the speaker of the Lok Sabha becomes the speaker, they should submit their resignations to the political party and take an oath that they will not be interested in any political party. But that's not happening here. The speaker continues to be a member of the ruling group, which is absolutely wrong. But neither does Dr. Ambedkar's opening speech, introduction to the draft constitution, or the closing speech on the conclusion of the deliberations mentions this aspect of the president being the supreme commander. Then the logical inference, as said by Peterborough, was it an unverbalized desire of the founding fathers that the supreme command be vested in the constitution entity that's above the partisan politics, thereby underscoring the apolitical character of the armed forces? Yes. Otherwise, the Indian army would have been like the Pakistan army, and there would have been coups every day. India ensured that the armed forces are apolitical. That's it. They are for the nation. They belong to the nation. They do not belong to any dispensation that may be concurrently at a given time in the time hold of the reins of the executive power, because executive power keep on changing. It was Congress, it was Janta, it was BJP, again Congress, again Janta, again a conglomerate of NDA and UP and whatever you want to call it. And secondly, this was just being guided by the British practice, where the supreme command of the armed forces is vested in the king. While designing the constitution, the members were following the certain British traditions, but at many times they broke with the traditions. Now, the British constitutional interpretation written by Montague and other scholars was that there was only once the founding fathers took on board for the grand study of the constitutional jurisprudence. They also consulted the first French constitution created by the French National Assembly in 1791, and that embodied the principles contained in the rights of man and the citizens equally animated them. So it was in the fundamental rights. Another matter that France had 12 constitutions between them and 1958. So in this period of 1791 to 1958, France had 15 constitutions. So they were impressed by the American ones, which was a permanent document. So inspiration came from the American document. The tradition came from the English system, and the freedom, the equality, fraternity, liberty, that came from the French. And the Bill of Rights, as ratified in America in 1791. Now, in both the American and the French constitution scheme, the Supreme Commander is president. But then, both these countries are presidential. Nearer home, no, China is a different kettle of fish. Here, China is an interesting institution dating back to 1925 called the Central Military Commission, and fascinatingly, after China assumed its president avatar, the General Secretary of the Communist Party has invariably been wearing three hats. He is also the President of the Republic. He is the chairperson of the Central Military Commission. For a short time when Deng was the president, then Deng was having one and two were being handled by Xian. But otherwise, only one person wears three hats. He is the Secretary General of the party, he is the President of the country, and he is the Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces. Interestingly, now compared to Pakistan, Article 243, 1A of the Constitution, amended 18th Amendment of 2010, states, without prejudice to the generality of the foregoing provision, the supreme command of the armed forces shall be in the President. But that was delayed. If they had not waited till 2010 and they had done it in 1947, it could have been different. So what had happened? This has not stopped Pakistan from being convulsed by a series of coups, and this started way back in 1958. It is therefore quite evident that rather than deliberately plan or design to impose civilian control over the armed forces, as conventional wisdom or subsequent myth-making make it to be, the President of India ending up becoming the Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces. And it's for the simple reason that the members of the Constituent Assembly decided to follow the British precedent. A study in the making of the Constitution shows, and this discussion of mine revealed, that the Indian Constitution, thoroughly written, drafted, deliberated, if you really delve deep into it, it can throw some very interesting revelations. For example, this India is a federation, but is it really a federation? No. In a federation, the central government has no right, in ordinary circumstances, to dismiss a government. But India, Article 156 can be imposed any time. So this makes the Constitution very lopsided. It says one thing, professes another, and does other. But then it covers the complete gamut of Indian system, because India is not one nation. It is one nation but having over 30 nationalities. So to make them one complete whole, it was essential to give a loose place somewhere and to tighten the ropes other places. And President, being the Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, has been extremely useful to India, because that has enabled the Indian Army, the Indian Armed Forces, to be absolutely apolitical. And that's why there never was any hope. But then let me tell you an interesting fact. At one time, the President of India wanted to be a dictator sort of a thing. He wanted to discuss the elected president. But then the better sense dawned on him, and he did not do it. I'm referring to Dr. Radhakrishnan in 1962, when India was defeated. He wanted to throw out the government But then he was advised by very sensible people, including the foreign governor general Rajgopalacharya and others. Don't do it. K.M. Munshi, don't do it. Because you might temporarily throw him out and Johar would accept it. But that shall be crucial as far as the country's future is concerned and country's integrity is concerned. And Radhakrishnan was a very sensible person. He immediately understood that somebody who had told him to do it was, in fact, acting in an anti-national manner. And he didn't do it. Otherwise, President as a Supreme Commander has been an excellent exposition of our supremacy of the people's elected leaders. They are good or bad, that's a different question. But the fact is that the democracy in the real sense is there. And that's why India has the right to be called the largest democracy in the world. At the same time, let me tell you, if this had not been there would have been definitely some desire of some president or some general to be the chief. And that would have been a disaster for the country. So, what the Constituent Assembly did, follow the British tradition, was an excellent idea, implemented sensibly, and that is making India what it is today, likely to be a global power. Thank you.